This is Mary Beth Sanders with my project presentation for TLED 7990, Residency and Capstone. The topic of our action research is how to improve the achievement gap for high school Spanish students who are struggling to retain academic information during a pandemic by introducing a grade-level reading intervention program as an improvement strategy at Dalton High School in North Georgia. This is our Dalton High School World Languages Department. This is our PLC as well, and we work together on the action plan. And then to the right, you'll see three of us that are the action research team that looked at the data a little bit more closely. I teach Spanish 1 and 2 with 35 years of teaching experience. Shanda Hester is our French lead teacher. She has 21 years teaching experience, and she does regular and advanced levels. And Sandy Crow is our advanced Spanish teacher with 23 years of teaching experience. Together with our PLC, we came up with a goal for the department for the year, which reads, teachers will implement a reading program to improve literacy for all students by introducing guided self-selected reading in a target language with a self-evaluation component by the end of the 2021-2022 school year. After determining our goal, the next step was for us to do research on literacy and second language acquisition. We learned from Stephen Krashen, who is a lead in comprehensible input, that reading is the best tool for learning another language. So we decided, since I had the least experience with a reading program, that we would use my students for Spanish 1 and 2. And here you see their Lexile scores from SLDS. Indicating that quite a few of my students are not on grade level for reading. And this led us to the purpose of the study, which is to identify potential reasons that students are not demonstrating transfer of knowledge from one year to the next, from one unit to the next, nor from one day to the next, and determine if there is a relationship between improved language acquisition and the implementation of a reading intervention program by using free voluntary reading. These were the steps that we used in order to complete our action research process. First, we identified our student learning goal in the PLC, and then we developed a reading interest survey for the students to fill out to give us some information and where to go from there. The classroom library was then created, and then the students took a pre-test, and they were scored. Then they did the reading intervention implementation for 8 weeks, and then they did the post-test and scored. And then we put the information in a chart in order for us to analyze the data. Here are a few items that we used in our action research. The reading inventory gave us information for how to establish the classroom library. The students indicated that only about 17% read for pleasure. 39% say that they do read minimally, and 18% read on a regular basis. The students did give us indication of what types of genre they prefer. The top 5 were fantasy, mystery, comics, scary, and sports. And reasons why students might read for pleasure were an interesting cover, friend or family suggested it, a teacher suggested it, advertised on the internet, or they knew the author or saw a trailer. From the Reading Interest Survey, we established the classroom library from a website called Reading A to Z that has graded level readers for our students to select. The students did take the pre-test first before they ever started any of the reading, and those were scored. When the students would select a text to read, they filled out the reading log that you can also see pictured here, where they would indicate vocabulary that they might find interesting or that they wanted to remember or utilize later. They also rated the book for their interest in it or likelihood that they would recommend it to a friend. And we did this for 8 weeks. At the end of 2 months, the students took the post-test, which was the same instrument as the pre-test. It included 100 of the most common Spanish words according to the ACTFL guidelines, and the students had to indicate their understanding of the meaning of the word in context based on reading a sentence in Spanish. When the post-test was finished, those were also graded, and then our team put together this chart of raw data for us to analyze using the Atlas protocol. We took a look at data from 127 students from Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. The reason we selected both levels is because the Spanish 2 students were the students that had to deal with the COVID and the hybrid schedule that we had. And we determined that many of them had deficiencies in the language and that they were part of a huge remediation for Spanish 1, so they were pretty much on the same level. There are more males in my classes than females, just slightly more, and the majority of my students are sophomores, and I have very few seniors. Also, I have a large Hispanic population in all of my classes, and this is representative of the demographic of the students in Dalton High School. As this graph clearly indicates, all of the groups that we took a look at did experience some gain from the pre-test to the post-test, even though the gain was small. The highest average on the pre-test and the post-test went to the Hispanics, with the females outperforming the males. The lowest average was made by males that were mostly white. The Spanish-speaking average increased 10 points on the pre-test and 20 points on the post-test when comparing it to the group average. The male students did make the greatest gains and the white males made the least progress. Sophomores are the largest group that I teach, and of course that would make sense why they would have the most failures pre and post-test. 23% of the students who were failing the course in the pre-test, that number was reduced to 6% by the post-test. So there was improvement overall in the students' ability in the class. Whether that was linked specifically to the reading intervention program is different research that we would have to conduct, but we were very pleased to see that there was a favorable outcome. So just a quick recap of the action research outcome. Students did improve in their vocabulary, and we did see that there were gains from the pre-test to the post-test on an average of 3 points. There were some irregularities in the research. There were students that did not follow the protocol of doing the pre-test reading intervention post-test according to the directions we had provided. So they were not able to be included in this study. There were actually 159 students originally, and by the time we went through to look at the students that followed the directions, we ended up with 127. Many of the students also indicated that they enjoyed doing the process. They liked being a part of research, and they also enjoyed reading more than they thought they were going to. It was very nice to hear students coming in the door asking, "Are we going to read today?" And then ultimately, teachers do want to continue this type of study for the future because this is baseline data for us and giving us an indication that it does matter, the reading for second language acquisition. We would like to continue to see what will happen within the next school year, particularly for the students that started with this pilot study. Some of the lessons that we learned as an action research team was to support one another throughout the process. There were days that we really needed to lean on one another to be able to get the work done. Staying the course was extremely important because there was much to do in a short period of time, and we needed each other to make sure that we were doing a good job and also to hold each other accountable. The accountability was important, particularly when we were counting up when we were grading the pre and the post test, making sure that there was continuity there and accuracy, as well as the accuracy when reporting the data with the scores. There were times when it did seem like we weren't going to get to the end, or that we were fatigued, maybe a little stressed out, and needed to regroup, and so it was important to have each other. Also, it was important to expect the unexpected. For example, as I mentioned before, when students didn't follow through, their attendance wavered, and they weren't here to do the entire program, or they missed the post-test, or they didn't complete the post-test because it was front and back. Some of them only did one side. It did create some irregularities that we did have to take into account and remove those from the study. But ultimately, the most important thing, I believe, is that the findings that we had are feedback. Even if we did not get the results that we were looking for, it doesn't mean that we failed. It just means that it gave us some information to go back through the cycle and determine what's next. So that was very exciting, and I think we all learned a great deal from this process. So if we could do the action research over, I think it would be great if we started sooner. We did try to get things going as close to the beginning of the semester as we could, but to be honest, we didn't get the reading going until February, so that meant February and March was the time that we had to be able to get the reading in. So it was cutting it a little bit close, and we felt the stress of that. Also, delegating the task to each team member so that we would carry the weight a little bit better. There were times, which is typical in a group project, when one or two people are doing most of the work. And I think maybe looking at a smaller sample population for the future is also a better idea. We did use the Spanish 1 and 2, which were a pretty decent sized number. I think maybe looking at just either Spanish 1 or Spanish 2 for the future would make this a little bit more manageable and enjoyable. Some additional learning that our team would like to do is through replicating the experiment for next year. Again, either looking at a smaller group or maybe tracking the students that went through the process this year, since they would be familiar with it, and then we also have some baseline data to see if there really would be a relationship between a reading intervention program and student second language acquisition. We also recognize that we need training on Lexile scores. We did find the information in the SLDS, but as a school, most teachers do not know what Lexile scores are, how to use them, and it would be beneficial if we had some professional learning on that. We kind of had to do our own, and so we would like to explore that a little bit more. Since we were just looking at Spanish this time, it'd be nice to see this process used in the other languages and then have an opportunity to compare those results. And then also we need to continue our research on how reading can impact foreign language learning. We only scratched the surface, and so there's much more to do. And then it'd be nice to be able to present what we find and the different types of professional learning that we've discovered to our school, so that other educators are learning from the process, and also taking an interest in action research and how to improve on problems of practice in the long run. I'd like to conclude with this quote in Spanish that I think sums up the importance of reading. Somos presos de lo que nos enseñaron hasta que comenzamos a leer, says that we are prisoners of what they taught us until we begin to read. Thank you so much.